Okay, now let's move to what's happening in Mumbai. We've been covering consistently on ET now what is happening with the COVID surges. Will a third wave come? Will it not? And we've also been telling you how strict rules have been put in place ahead of the festive season, which actually kicks off at the end of this week. So in Mumbai, we have been seeing an increase in cases over the last few days. So in September itself, in the first 7 days of September, we've seen nearly 30% of all the cases which took place in the month of August, and that has become a matter of concern. We are wondering if that means that there could be a third wave around the corner. Now, to speak on this, I'm joined today by Dr. Rahul Pandit and Dr. Srivastava. Both of them are members of the Maharashtra COVID Task Force. Thank you so much for speaking with us here on the India Development Debate. Dr. Rahul Pandit, how do you look at this data which is being seen? This is data, of course, that BMC puts out every day. We've been seeing a consistent 350, 400, up to 450 cases per day for quite some time. This even as vaccinations are racing ahead. How do you see this?
Good evening, Tamanna, and thank you for having me on your show. I believe that this increase in the cases is definitely concerning. There is no doubt about that. We have known now that since we've opened up on the 15th of August, there would be some increase in the cases, which is what we, as doctors, we've been expecting around 2 weeks down the line. But this 400 plus figure is obviously a concern. And this is despite having all the, vaccination increasing. Your testings have been consistently between 35,000 to 45,000, and your test positivity rate has certainly gone up a little bit than what it was before. If we deep dive into the data, we need to separate out the test positivity rate between the patients who have had RT-PCR versus patients who have had a COVID antigen. And I believe the RT-PCR, which is the gold standard, might still be above 1 consistently, though the COVID antigen may be below 1. So I think it is a concerning thing. Whether it's a third wave or not, I think it's probably too early to comment. But certainly these are figures which we need to observe very closely. We need to again go back to our epidemiological principles to control the whole problem and make sure that during the festivities we all behave like responsible citizens.
No, absolutely. Those of you living in the city in Mumbai would have observed many pockets where people have just dropped their masks. They've pretty much forgotten about it and slipped into that ease and comfort. Dr. Srivastava, is that, what the real concern is, and how do you see the data? Is the data something which has put out a red flag for policymakers?
Yes, Tamanna, good evening. Two very valid questions that you are asking. The first part is, of course, is the data concerning? Yes, as Rahul has already pointed out, it is concerning. I don't think you can disregard these figures that are coming our way. And with the way the second wave behaved when the lockdowns were lifted, we are now heading into the festive season between, say, September to right up to December, January, until the New Year's festivities finish. So if we are going to be looking at positivity rates, that is going to be a reflection of a number of things. How many people are being tested, which test are you counting as positive? Again, the rapid antigen test has only got a sensitivity of about 35%. So, you might be a number of patients who are probably shedding the virus, maybe falling through those crevices. So are you missing out on a large part of the data that you ought to be covering more stringently? Well, I think that is the case. So I'm not sure if there is any single policy that can be made that will be overriding the common sense of an individual. I don't think that any government, whether it's the BMC or the state government, I don't think that anybody can write a policy to say, look, you must do this. It must come from the responsibility of the individual. And if the individual is going to be irresponsible on these things, I'm not sure what else can be said to such an individual, that except for the fact that the misadventures of maybe 10% of the people are going to put a clamp down on the remaining 90%. That's what we're going to see. So we probably need to be having the kind of behavior that will be setting the tone for the next 4 to 6 months' time. Otherwise, if these numbers keep climbing the way they are, I'm sorry. I think we are up for a big kind of problem right in front of us, Tamanna.
No, this is also happening at a time. We have to understand these numbers are, I wouldn't say they're beginning to climb up again, but they're showing the first signs at a time when more and more people are getting actively vaccinated. Dr. Rahul Pandit, the sense which has sunk into people is that we've got 2 shots, in some cases, in many cases a single shot, and as has been widely explained now, that if you get a single shot after having contracted COVID, it works for you like a second shot. So people are feeling this sense of immunity. Scientifically, medically, is this misplaced?
Yes, so I think again, very good question. We all know that the vaccines offer us an immunity, and that immunity is very protective against death and severe disease. Just being vaccinated does not stop us from getting COVID 19. And in fact, it could actually be a little bit misleading because those with vaccine would have a asymptomatic or a mild disease and would not even realize that they are shedding the virus, and would go around in their day shedding the virus to their loved ones at home, to people whom with they are traveling, or in their office spaces or workspaces. And I think that needs to be again emphasized, that even after vaccination, masking is mandatory. And just because you're vaccinated does not mean that you are allowed to step out. If you can still manage to work from home, study from home, or do whatever your livelihood without actually going into crowded places or public places, I think that's the first step they should encourage themselves to do. Only if people are who are having no options, they still have to step out of the house despite vaccination, should wear a mask, preferably a double mask, and then go for their work and keep their guard up all the time. Only then you would actually have a good sense of protection for yourself and people surrounding you.
Are we seeing more cases coming in at the hospital level, Dr. Srivastava, at the clinic level, with symptoms or any kind of serious symptoms? We've not reached there yet, have we?
No, fortunately, we have not yet gotten there. We are seeing a lot of people who got themselves tested or came to a hospital casualty simply because they had the symptoms of what is often described as the common cold, but then they started getting other symptoms like severe headache, body ache, or shortness of breath, or palpitations, other things depending upon which organ is involved. They come to the casualty of a hospital. That's when they get tested, and that's how they find out. So we're not really seeing huge numbers coming to hospital, and a lot of the patients that are being tested positive can be managed as an outpatient. The problem is that in a small number, say about 20%, maybe 15 to 20%, this population waits until such time as some kind of trouble starts to manifest. So when they are really short of breath or they are not able to perform their daily functions is the time when they get to a hospital. And that this percentage of people, when they get to a hospital, they will need to be hospitalized. Fortunately, a lot of them are recovering and not needing the ventilator or the ICU care, or needing it for a very short period of time. So we're nowhere close to where we were in the second wave right now. But as we've all seen, this can change very rapidly when we talk about the R0 factor. That can very simply change in a matter of days, And so being abundantly cautious is going to be the order of the day.
Are we seeing any spike in infections in children? Let me go to Dr. Pandit with that first, because this whole fright and fear was because this will be the only unvaccinated and relatively less exposed target or audience of society. They could see higher infections. Are you seeing any kind of evidence of that?
So I am an adult specialist. I really don't look after children at all. But from what I hear of my COVID pediatric task force members, I believe there is not much increase in the infections there. But maybe Om might be better placed, being an ID physician. He looks after the entire spectrum. Maybe Om, you could answer that question better.
Okay. Yeah, sure, Dr. Srivastava.
I have to say my own impressions are that this bit about kids being more affected is a little bit overrated. I think rather than look at a population like kids, we probably ought to be focusing on the immune system of patients. You could be a very fit 80-year-old and you could be a very unhealthy 25-year-old. So the difference is going to be what your immune system is going to do when and if you get an infection. That is what is going to make all the difference. I don't think that kids are in any way more vulnerable
Yeah.
than adults. I think it's going to be a matter of keeping. I mean, if you're going to target that set of population in school places where I'm talking to at least half a dozen schools, advising them on their policies. But I don't really see kids getting into a state of being far more vulnerable or being more infected. Like I keep saying, it has got nothing to do with your age. It's got to do with your immune system. You could be a very unhealthy adult or a very fit kid, and that is what is going to make all the difference. So my feeling is that when we look at maybe 6 months down the line, I think this pediatric population being more at risk, we are going to find that it was underrated from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. That'll be great news if children don't see a larger spike. This is just a very nascent period, and it's because we've learned from our lessons that we're keeping such a close eye on even such a small sample size of numbers like the first week of September. But thank you so much, Dr. Pandit and Dr. Srivastava, for joining us for this quick chat. Now, before we get to